It's February 9th, 2016, and we've got 30 weeks to go until the 2016 NFL season. This is Real in the Field Goals. I'm Kenneth Arthur. With me, as always, is Danny Kelly from FieldGoals.com, where we're talking about the Seahawks every week. This is our first off-season edition of 2016. We've been doing this show for pretty much 1 year now, and we're raring to go for our second off-season. And today we've got Spike Friedman with us of The Stranger. Spike, what is going to be your main credit this year, you think?
My main credit this year, I suppose The Stranger. Hopefully my very exciting sketch comedy show about sports that I haven't written and have not produced.
No, that's what we've got. Spike Friedman here from that sketch show that isn't written or produced yet. So of course everyone knows about that. But Spike, obviously well known for his work on The Stranger. I guess Grantland, that's not a thing anymore, right?
No, it's not a thing anymore.
Unfortunately, no more Grantland. But I'm sure something will always pop up in its place. Probably sports sketch comedy, and we can talk more about that. But we'll start out today talking about the Super Bowl. The Panthers lose that one. I've already forgotten the score. The Broncos win it. And I think someone on this podcast, maybe even a week ago, said that the Panthers would struggle to score, that Cam Newton would struggle, that they wouldn't put up more than 20 points. They put up 10 points and they lost to the Broncos. Starting with you, Danny, just some thoughts there on the Super Bowl. Did it go as you expected?
No, it didn't. I was expecting the Panthers to do better.
Listen to me.
Yeah, I know. Kenny, for the record, if you didn't listen last week, Kenny predicted that the Panthers would have a really hard time scoring, have a really hard time moving the ball, and that came true. I don't know. I was expecting them to do a little bit better. I thought it was going to be a close game. I think I said it was going to be a low-scoring, close game. It kind of ended up being that way. But I didn't think it kind of did feel kind of like the Broncos dominated, even though the score was pretty close by the end. I just thought the Panthers just looked like they couldn't do anything that they did all year, and they were scoring 30 points a game or whatever, and Cam Newton looked out of sorts, and then kind of imploded at the end of the game there, and so.
And his explanation wasn't his explanation for why he did it basically confirming what everyone else was saying, that it was a business decision?
Yeah, actually, and I probably foolishly tried to defend the act. To me, when it happened, when he didn't go for that fumble, it looked to me like he thought the ball was going to bounce out, and so he kind of stayed on his feet anticipating that, but turns out he just said, he didn't want to get hurt. So that kind of opens him up to some criticism. Or, I mean, he was already going to get it anyway, but...
Spike, do you want to open him up to any criticism?
I feel like he should be criticized, but the degree to which he's already been criticized leaves little meat on the bone of criticizing Cam Newton at this point. He should have probably dove at that ball. He also hit his receivers in the hands all day, and they kept dropping it. I mean, Jericho Cotchery had 2 pretty catastrophic drops. Ted Ginn had one tip off his fingers, and at a certain point, it's just like, I feel bad for the degree to which he's been pilloried, despite the fact he deserves to be pilloried to some degree.
Yeah, it's I didn't see as many drops as everyone else made. I'm probably blind to that stuff now. I can't see any of that kind of stuff. I can only view Cam Newton's errors. So I can't really view anybody else's at this point. I have to take your guys' word for it and everybody else's that there were dropped passes. But I did see, there was definitely some dropped interceptions on the Panthers' part. And there were times that they could have taken more of an advantage of Peyton Manning, and they didn't. They weren't able to do that. I think that would have been one of the key factors, obviously, in Carolina if they were able to win that game. Would have been their defense wasn't getting some of those turnovers that they had been getting in the previous weeks. Spike, did you have any thoughts on Peyton Manning, sort of his career? Do you think that winning a second Super Bowl that was like, I don't know, what's the opposite of a pinnacle, at the bottom of his career, that matters towards his legacy?
No, I mean, it's nice, I guess, that he got a second ring, and in 20 years when people forget the way in which he got that second ring, it might affect his legacy, but he was already one of the greats, and he did quite poorly all year, and including in the Super Bowl. So it doesn't really do anything for me. Uh, he he kissed Papa John after. That's got to be worth something. Like, I wouldn't have thought he was gonna like let Papa John kiss him after winning the Super Bowl. So that adds a dimension to the legacy.
Would you kiss Papa John?
Personally,
No, professionally.
yes, professionally, definitely. Personally, I'm iffy.
Did you know
It
that
would
Kenny
depend.
actually interviewed Papa John one time?
I did
Can
Well,
we hear that story again, Kenny?
There wasn't. I mean, there's not too much to it. I mean, I just got connected. I don't know why the PR person reached out to me to like, hey, do you want to interview Papa John? You don't get too many opportunities like that in your life. So
And
I
you're
did
like, hell
interview
yes.
him. I asked him, the most important question, which is when are we going to get that garlic butter sauce just like in its own container? Can I buy it from the grocery store? And he said that they had been thinking about it, I think, in the past, but not as of yet. And I also asked him, what's the deal with pepperoncinis? You throw like 3 misshapen pepperoncinis in there, and it's like, who is that for? The one person that wants pepperoncinis? What if 8 of us wanted pepperoncinis? That's why I just wanted to give him some advice on how to improve the quality of the Papa John's. I like Papa John's as far as the chain pizza goes. Papa John's, it's probably up there right now with Domino's as far as chain. Pizza Hut is definitely at the bottom for me right now.
Is
Danny,
Papa
do you
John's
have
take
any?
and bake?
No, you're thinking of
It's
Papa Murphy's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get your
I
Papas
don't
right.
think I've ever been to Papa John's.
You've never been to Papa John's?
I don't think so.
Papa Murphy's is really good. That's
I've had
not so
Papa
much.
Murphy's.
They don't have that in California, so I don't know how
Mm.
deep Papa Murphy's actually goes.
I think I'm gonna repost your Papa John's interview at Field Goals because it was like, yeah, we were supposed to interview him about the Super Bowl, and he didn't really say anything that interesting. So he just talked about something else the whole time.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I had to talk to Papa John, so especially at that point. That's why I talked to Guy Fieri. If you get the opportunity, uh, you know, just do it. And Papa John, he's got a really good. There's a really good like advertisement that he had done like with his son, Bo. It's on YouTube and it's really good. It's like they're at home and they're ordering. It's like the first time that you could order Papa John's online. So it was like
Hmm.
introducing like how to order pizza online, which is like the only way people order pizza now. But at a time it was like, whoa, there were no pizza trackers or anything like that. Where do you order pizza from if you can order pizza?
If I'm
Danny?
going, if I'm going
Oh.
chain pizza, I'm going
Yeah.
Pizza Hut because I just want pure garbage thrown into my mouth. And like,
Mhm.
I love the Pizza Hut pan. I love that crunch at the bottom. I haven't found a decent delivery place now that I've moved down to Los Angeles. Up in Seattle, I would do Pagliacci's, but I wasn't happy about it. Wasn't
Mhm.
happy about it.
Pagliacci's is good. You know what my go-to in Seattle is?
No.
A
What?
Pizza Mart. A Pizza Mart. Have you ever been
A
there?
pizza.
Yeah, in the University District.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah, and they deliver late, right?
Yeah, they're like kind of like they're like the Taco Bell of pizza places. They stay open late and they have like a bar in there, and it's like to get the
You
people
go to a
coming out
Taco
from the
Bell that
bars.
has a bar in there?
No, I meant like in the context that like Taco Bell like caters to like stoners and people who are drunk. I feel like A Pizza Mart does that too.
So is it good or is it good
No,
drunk
it's
food?
really good. I like it's probably like my favorite pizza of all time.
Jeez.
I'll stump for Big Mario's in Seattle if I'm getting delivery,
I think
and
that's yeah, it's good. I think.
yeah, it's good. And Delancey if I'm going to eat there.
Mhm.
There's one in Beacon Hill, Pizza del Corso. Now I'm just repping pizza places for a city I no longer live
Well,
in. But
the
Do you like
Delancey's is great. Delancey's puts little shards of lemon on their pizza, and it's the bomb. We should try and get sponsored by all these people.
yeah, I was stepping out hard to see if anybody would sponsor us for the Super Bowl, if anybody would send us
Like a
free
party.
food and we yeah, last year we had one. I'm not even going to mention the name because they didn't do it again. So last year we had
oh,
someone, but this year I would have loved to get some free pizza or something out of it. Nothing came to fruition. But
Kenny's cold calling people to see if they will sponsor his
hey,
Super Bowl party.
if you've got a taste of, pun intended, but if someone gives you a taste of free food, you just can't wait to get some more. What did you guys do for the Super Bowl, Spike?
I made a buffalo chicken dip and watched it over at a friend's house because after the last 2 years, it was a big come down to not care at all.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty surreal actually as the game was rolling on. I was like, oh, I forgot how little I can care. And then when you don't care at all and you don't care about the broader picture of the season, and you start watching like a defensive slugfest, you're just like, don't get hurt. Stop doing this to yourselves. No one cares, except of course people do care. I'm sure there are Broncos fans out there who will correct me, but it was tough. It was tough to watch this year.
Did you think it was a good game?
No, I didn't.
Boring.
Again, I think there were too many offensive miscues, and then the Panthers' inability to turn the ball over, despite the opportunities they created. It felt sloppy, and especially the first half felt like it really dragged with all the incompletions and the penalties. It didn't feel like a great defensive slugfest. It felt like a sloppy game that the defenses dominated.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
what
did
did you
you-
think of the commercials?
Weak, but
Yeah.
we got a good side bet going. About a quarter into the game, we decided everybody would pick an animal, and then if that animal hit in CGI form, next you won a very small amount of money. But it really kept the intensity up because there were some ads where like an animal would come in, they'd be like, "Oh, is that CGI?" And it would look like a regular animal, but by the end it would like sing or something, and that really brought the whole atmosphere to a fever pitch.
Yeah, that's an interesting prop bet. We had a prop bet that during the halftime show, if anybody fell down, that was worth like 10-1.
Whoa,
And,
Beyonce almost
so
fell.
Beyonce almost fell, and the crowd, the place that I was in with everybody in
Erupted.
there just went freaked out. Like it was like, oh God! And that was probably our biggest freak out moment of the whole thing was when Beyonce almost fell.
That's pretty funny.
We had a prop bet on the theme of the halftime show, which I called as South Asian appropriation, but then I was deemed to be a foul because I was aware that there was a Coldplay music video in which they used South Asian appropriation, and so I was vetoed my victory for having known about a Coldplay music video. So that was a pretty rough moment for me.
There is no victory in knowing about a Coldplay music video.
What's the lesson there?
During the third quarter or fourth quarter of the Super Bowl, Marshawn Lynch tweeted out his retirement, basically. Not unexpected that he would retire, though. The way he went out and the timing he went out, I think, somewhat controversial, maybe to some. I mean, there is a piece in Seattle PI, or no, not Seattle PI.
Times.
The Times about, whatever, that it wasn't taken over well by Seahawks fans. When someone comes in new to the Seattle media landscape and seems to not be a Seattle fan, sort of like a Jeff Baker situation. I don't think you necessarily have to be a fan. You really don't have to be a fan to be a good writer. And there is no plus. I'm not saying a plus or minus either way. It's just it is interesting how there is backlash because people will, discredit someone if they feel they're not being positive towards their favorite players. Spike, did you think that there was anything wrong with the way with which Marshawn Lynch retired or the timing?
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I could see thinking there's something wrong with it, but it's pretty easy to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think that that's pretty much the ask that you make at the Seattle Times. It's just, if you're talking about a columnist, like at least with Jeff Baker, I've found that he can do pretty strong interview work. That piece he broke on Zorenzik a couple years ago, even if his game-to-game analysis isn't there, he had sources in the clubhouse. He was able to paint a pretty accurate picture of what's going on. The new writer at the Times, I mean, he's just a columnist. He's taking over Jerry Brewer's slot. And it's disappointing that he's coming in hard contrarian, like using the word class around Marshawn, which has been a shorthand for just dumping on the guy by people for the bulk of his career, and it's just unfortunate. Like, it bummed me out to see that, and it's unnecessary because Like, who cares? Like,
Right.
even if you don't like it, it was a tweet. Like who cares? And I mean, and given how great Marshawn has been, and the fact that it's a super classy picture that he used to call it classless, it's just like, come on, man,
Yeah, and
don't
it
be
was interesting
Skip
because he said
Bayless.
that that Marshawn was trying to steal the spotlight. In reality, uh, Danny, I mean, you said something to the same effect. Isn't he actually trying to be drowned out by the spotlight to be able to say something with people paying attention to and everybody in the world paying attention to
Right.
something else going on in football? So it's his way to sneak under the radar.
I mean, yeah, I feel like if you're trying to like sneak something in, you do that when something else major is happening, right? It's like burying it, under the deluge of everything in the Super Bowl. So I don't know. I just thought the idea that people thought he was trying to steal the spotlight was ridiculous. And I mean, who cares? Like, why do
Right.
we have? It's like, are we supposed to politely clap like for the Super Bowl? Like, it's who cares? Like, it's I don't know. I don't even get it. I thought it was like the coolest way you could do it, honestly. Like his tweet, was like no words. It was just a peace sign, and then his, hanging up his cleats, and
Mm-hmm.
I had no problem with it. I
I
thought
didn't
it was
get it at
awesome.
first. I didn't even like. Someone had to point it out to me. That I think it literally just had to be spelled out for me because I was like, oh, he's just throwing some shoes around down in Oakland or something. I didn't get it. I
Yeah.
thought it was literally taking a picture of something he had done, not like retiring.
Right.
It took me a minute to put it together.
What did Spike? What did Marshawn Lynch mean to you? Like, I assume you're a Seahawks fan. Is that
I am,
correct?
yeah. Yeah,
What did he
since
mean to you as a
childhood.
fan?
Uh Lynch is he's such a physical force through his whole career, and the degree to which he was able to embody the offensive side of Pete Carroll's philosophy and everything that Pete Carroll has meant to this team after the brief Jim Mora era. I feel like Lynch is the embodiment of it. And when I think about like the way in which Carroll asked the players to be their truest selves in the game, I think Lynch was that to the highest degree of anybody, including Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman. So for me, Lynch represents this sort of halcyon era of Seahawks football that we've lived through over the past few years more than anybody else. And sort of as much as you can look at from when Russell Wilson came in, how strong the team has been, the no double-digit loss, or the 10-point loss, but no double-digit losses aside from that. It's Lynch who's the one who's, to me, like speaks to like that comeback, that won't give up, taking body blows. Plus, he's just awesome. He's hilarious. He's mean to the right guys and awesome with the right guys. I rewatched that Buffalo video where he goes to Dave and Buster's and Applebee's all the time. I love the final image. I think it's a beautiful image. I think it speaks to his career, the way in which he worked without talking. I love the image you guys have on a shirt of it. I think it's beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
love Marshawn. Like, how do you not love Marshawn?
Right.
It's crazy. And even I can't even imagine not liking him as an opponent. I get not liking Russell Wilson if you're an opponent. I get not liking Richard Sherman if you are an anti-intellectual opponent or something. But like Marshawn is just like the purest embodiment of football, and I love him. And even if this last year was pretty rough, it doesn't diminish at all the legacy I think he has with the team.
It seems
Well
like,
said.
yeah, it definitely seemed like for a long time, and even now, a lot of fans hate the Seahawks and they hate the Seahawks fans, but a lot of them will qualify that with saying, "But I love Marshawn Lynch. He seems to
Hmm.
transcend being, that hated Seahawk type mentality that a lot of people have for a Russell Wilson or Pete Carroll." For you, Spike, like who would be your 5 favorite running backs of all time? I'm kind of curious what that group might look like and where Marshawn Lynch may fit into it.
I mean, for me, Marshawn, in terms of like favorite as a fan, is number one. Because when I think about Sean Alexander, I think about the offensive line. Ricky Waters, I think
And this
about
can
missed
be,
opportunities.
I'm talking 5, any team.
Oh, fair enough. But even then, I still think, for me, I think the personal affiliation with Marshawn puts him at the top. Barry Sanders is obviously one where his elusiveness and also his ability to survive on those Lions teams, and then also the highlights that he's busted off are incredible. LT, for me, I mean, he's another one where it's the combination of skills that he brought to the game uh, is a big one. I hated playing against him, but Marshall Faulk in the same way. His versatility was always really exciting to me to watch when we weren't playing the Rams or when we had an off year and the Rams were particularly good, especially or back when he was on the Colts even. And to go to fill out a top five, I don't know who I'd fill out a top five with. Weirdly, the name that popped in my head was Rashard Mendenhall because he led me to a fantasy title, but that's an embarrassing fifth favorite running back.
Danny, help him fill out
Throw
some
it on the
more
board.
favorites.
Mendenhall.
Did you mention Adrian Peterson?
I didn't.
Because of personal feelings probably towards him.
It's both personal feelings and also like there's a blandness to his excellence.
Yeah, is there anything like I can't even think because when I think of like some of the most exciting, I don't think of Adrian Peterson as one of the most exciting running backs of all time. He's not up there at all.
Like I think about Lynch's highlight reels, and you can watch a 3-minute highlight reel of Marshawn Lynch and be like missing a play. Like I feel like the play he had in the NFC title game against San Francisco in 2014. That, to me, is my favorite of his plays, mostly because my friend who I was sitting next to on the couch got up so quickly to cheer that he literally passed out. And it's just this very vivid memory. It's an incredible run. So, it's a 40
the one where he flipped at the end?
Yeah, exactly.
Flipped into the end zone? Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're talking about an incredible run, and that doesn't even make every highlight reel. And without that run, we probably don't come back in that game. And we might not win the Super Bowl. And so it's just like Marshawn had so many thrilling plays, and Peterson is just like so good. He's so good, but I feel like his biggest plays are like when they throw 9 in the box and he can like hit the first gap, make one guy miss, and then he's got daylight, and it's an 80-yard run. Whereas Lynch, it's broken tackle after broken tackle.
Yeah. I was thinking I think Jamal Charles and maybe LaShawn McCoy are more exciting to watch than AD.
I'd agree with that.
Just because they're more explosive.
Charles is crazy too because it's his career average is over 5. He's like always had an over 5. Like there's not been a downfall in Jamal's career except for the injuries. And the other thing about Barry Sanders that I thought was interesting is I found out today, or I saw today that Barry Sanders Jr. is transferring from Stanford to Oklahoma State, which shocked me because I found out there was a Barry Sanders Jr.
Yeah.
Like, how can he be the son of Barry Sanders with the same name playing at Stanford? And which is funny, I guess, because he's playing with Ed McCaffrey's son, who is sort of just taking the spotlight, and that's probably why he's transferring. But, I mean, to me, that just signified how hard it is to make it in the NFL, that you can have the same bloodline as Barry Sanders and still, not really be much of a prospect.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see with him, but yeah, it's hilarious. I agree that it's hilarious that he's blocked by McCaffrey. Because for me, Ed McCaffrey, not quite the exciting player that Barry Sanders was as an NFL pro. I mean, very good receiver, not quite Barry Sanders.
Yeah, just overall, I think Marshall Faulk is a great answer. I mean, he's sort of transcendent in the way that he almost changed the game, I think, in a lot of ways, and how running backs could be used as receivers. I mean, the Rams in total, but for Marshall Faulk, I feel like Marshall Faulk was to Dick Vermeil, what Marshawn Lynch was to Pete Carroll, which was getting this running back from another team that wasn't properly appreciating him, perhaps, or utilizing him, and then saying we have a new offense and we're going to make it work in this way. And Marshall Faulk, he really blew up those years. I'm looking at some of the others that sort of were in that all-time rushing list, and Frank Gore at 15. I mean, Frank Gore, you didn't want him to do it against the Seahawks, but Frank Gore, he's probably one of the best running backs that I've seen over the last 10 or 15 years. Would you guys agree?
I think, yeah, I would. I was actually thinking him too. But he's kind of, to me, he's a little bit like Adrian Peterson in that he doesn't have electrifying runs, I guess. He's just kind of a bruiser, and he has really great vision, and he can bounce it outside when he needs to. But I don't remember. I can't picture any incredible runs that he's made, if that makes any
I can
sense. I
remember
mean,
him in Seattle.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
The only ones I can think of are against the Seahawks, so I kind of hold them against him. He made Earl Thomas look like a fool in 2013, and that was a rude and rare occurrence. So.
yeah. But I would put him up there, though. I like Frank Gore.
Yeah, I mean, so Lynch is 36th all time on the rushing list. He finishes with fewer rushing yards than players like Amon Green, Chris Johnson, Sean Alexander, Clinton Portis, Ricky Williams, Eddie George, Tiki Barber, Thomas Jones, who's 25th, surprisingly
Thomas
enough,
Jones? Wow.
Jamal Lewis, Warwick Dunn, Corey Dillon. He's going to have some of the best playoff numbers of all time. I wrote about it for Rolling Stone this week, but he definitely has some of the best playoff numbers. And when you
That's
look up at
big.
his rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, the only guys that have as many of him are in the Hall of Fame, with the exception of one guy. There one of them. One of them is definitely. I can't think. One of them was a guy that's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and then the other one
Hmm.
was sort of a guy that may be one of those borderlines. I can't just work. I just can't
Is
remember.
Terrell Davis in? Because I think
Terrell
that's
Davis, the guy that's on the borderline.
There
So
you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
he's got a lot
I
of
think
huge postseason numbers, but wasn't in the regular season for long enough. So Spike, would you say that Marshawn Lynch is a Hall of Famer?
for me, he is. I think it's going to take a couple of years for him to get in. I think the difference between him and Davis, and honestly, if Thomas Rawls is as good as we want him to be, it's going to hurt Lynch, is that I feel like Davis had a similar, like, extraordinary run, extraordinary postseason, but then his achievements were sort of like washed off the board a little bit by how good the next running backs to come into Shanahan's system were. When you think about like Mike Anderson putting up like as many yards as he did, uh, and if the Seahawks continue to produce runners at the level of Lynch and who put up 1,400 yards a year, it might damage Lynch's candidacy a little bit. That said, the uniqueness of how he played, his postseason numbers, his style, the way other guys treated him, and the fact that his numbers are pretty close, even if they aren't lock Hall of Fame numbers, I think he
Yeah.
will get in, but it won't be easy.
Yeah, I think you nailed that one. I think in terms of his numbers, he's on the borderline, but his style and his place among his peer in terms of his contemporaries, I think he's generally believed to be probably the best or the second best running back of his generation. I mean, it'd probably be him and Adrian Peterson, but yeah, I mean, I think just the way he played and like how many highlight runs he had, I think he has. Someone PFF was tweeting it some absurd amount of yards after contact, and so I think all that combined, I think that he would be a Hall of Famer. I mean, I don't really know. I was asking Kenny about this before. I don't really know like the benchmarks that you have to hit as a running back. Like I just don't know those off the top of my head, but
Well, I
it
think
seems to me.
that it's flowing. There are certain benchmarks, and then there are things that will elevate you. And I think the fact is that yeah, he is the league's leading rusher since 2010. I mean, Adrian Peterson missed some time, and that obviously I think Adrian Peterson would be the rushing leading rusher of the last half decade if he wasn't suspended and injured. But that being said, the players that are on the field are the ones that are on the field, and I think that if you're the best running back in the NFL or one of the top two for a 5-year period, that's a good excuse to be in the Hall of Fame. The fact that before
Mhm.
that he had 2,000-yard seasons in Buffalo before that,
True.
with Terrell Davis, like the fact that the Broncos were able to put in some other guys and be successful is one thing, but I think also, just the fact is he was great for 3 years. He may have been the most valuable player in the NFL for 3 years, but his last season was 26. He was 26 years old when he was really at his last effective. So he
Yeah.
really fell off after that. He had like 1,100 yards after he was 26. And so the next guys that come in there, Mike Anderson, Orlando Scary, Clinton Portis, and I think Clinton Portis, even with his success in Denver, the fact that he replicated the success in Washington showed that he was more than a product of a system. He was
Yeah.
a good player.
And
So I
they do
definitely,
they
I mean,
all.
I made the argument before the season that Marshawn Lynch was a Hall of Famer. Just
Mhm.
he didn't do anything to this season to help his case, but that's fine by me because I already felt that if you're going to be the most memorable running back of your generation, or second most, because his highlight reels will always, forever reign upon the playoffs when they do sort of memorable moments. I think Marshawn Lynch will be there 25 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you got to take some of the intangibles too. Like you said, like he's one of the most memorable guys. Like to me, that like is a good argument to put him in there too, just because he's been such an icon in the league.
Yeah, I think it's Jerome. I mean, Jerome Bettis gets in, and I also think adjusting for era, the fact that running backs, as a rule, don't throw up 6 straight 1,300-yard years the way they used to. And so punishing him for not being a mid-90s running back is silly because he was as close to that as you could get over the past 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. There should be some era adjustment, just like for anybody else. I mean, Joe Namath is not a Hall of Famer if you compared him against the passers of even the 90s or definitely not the 2000s.
Yeah, he's not even Ryan Tannehill today.
No. Joe Namath's numbers are pretty disgusting, but you just have to sort of understand. Like, I don't know, you look at Bill Walton's numbers in the NBA. I didn't really understand how he was considered one of the greatest players of all time. If you look at Bill Walton's numbers, but I think you have to sort of live at the time to really get that. Not to talk about basketball, which I'm not really qualified to do.
That's the first Bill Walton reference on this podcast, I think.
Not the last.
No, hopefully not.
I'm so glad I was here for the first.
Well, yeah, because Spike, I mean, you're a pretty big NBA fan, aren't you?
I'm actually very excited. I got Warriors Clippers tickets. I do love watching this Warriors team play, but it's so hard to care when they keep not giving us back the Sonics.
Right.
Yeah, it would be hard for. I don't even know what I would do at this point if the Sonics came back. I mean, is my heart ready for that? Like, I've already sort of been rooting for the Warriors, and now it's like, what am I supposed to do if they did come back to Seattle, the team? I don't even know. Is there even any talk right now of a certain team moving or of any expansion? Is there any talk along those lines?
Not that I know of. The Bucks, after the Kings deal got handled, it was the Bucks maybe, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. So it would probably have to be expansion. Looking at the way the salary cap is about to get really weird in the NBA, I don't know if that's going to make owners more or less likely to want more competition in the market. I just don't know. The next 2 years are going to be really weird, though, in terms of free agency, so maybe that opens up the possibility, but there's nothing like there was 2 years ago when it looked like a pretty good chance.
This is kind of off. I mean, this is in that subject. It's off topic for Seahawks, but is Chris Hansen still involved in all this?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
I sent out a positive Chris Hansen tweet and a negative Sacramento tweet that got picked up by some radio guy down there, and it turns out they don't like Chris Hansen in Sacramento to a degree I had no understanding of until I was being pilloried for my appearance on Twitter. They were looking up pictures of me and making fun of me. I'm like, I'm not that weird looking, guys.
Jeez, that's brutal. That's why I don't have any. I try not to have any real pictures of me online.
Smart.
Yeah, I mean, I already lost my train of thought. I just, I think that the Sonics just sort of moved past it. If it comes, it comes. But I definitely got really into the hype, and for a minute there, I remember that they had said that the Kings were moving to Seattle, like it was 99.9%.
Yeah, they were like
right?
celebrating it. Yeah.
So yeah, it looked done. I mean, it looked done more so even than some of the NFL to LA stuff looked as recently.
Do you think that the success of the Seahawks at all elevates the opportunities for a team to come here? Do you think that that they could see that fans are sort of ready to root for the Seahawks and an NHL team, or do you think that it doesn't really matter because the Mariners are still bringing down the status quo?
I think it doesn't matter. I think that right now it's still advantageous to use Seattle as leverage. I think that it's a market that is both valuable and expendable at the same time, which is just a tough place to be. And LA is not that type of market for the NBA, but with an organization as powerful and as economically viable as the NFL, a market as big as LA could be that way for the NFL. I think Seattle just falls into the same category. Took 20 years to bring the Rams back. You're looking at that timeline. I think Seattle will be underwater by the time the Sonics get back. Just an unfortunate vision of the future.
Speaking of the Rams moving, what do you think of the new situation with the NFL in terms of now you're going to have an NFL team in LA potentially too? I don't know if they haven't. I mean, they're playing. San Diego's playing 2016 in San Diego, but then it's up in the air after that still, I believe. What do you think of that dynamic in terms of just what it means for the NFL?
I think it makes sense to bring the Rams back, which is unfortunate because really dicked over the St. Louis market. But the Rams have a real lineage in Los Angeles, and it's not like there was, like Kenny was saying with the Sonics, it isn't like there was this need for the Rams to come back, but there were like latent Rams fans who will get back on board and make sure that stadium isn't just functionally a road stadium for the first couple of years. The facility, the fact that it's all privately funded, is about as good as you can ask for from the city's perspective. That said, the fact that it is a mile and a half away from a train station that's about to be built is unfortunate. Like, that distance is like so close and so far at the same time, where it's almost connected to LA's growing rail network but isn't quite. And then it's very close to the 405 and LAX, which means that traffic is going to be a bit of a problem, especially on Monday and Thursday nights. Mm-hmm. Oh, God. I'm dreading the notion of Seahawks getting primetime games.
Yeah.
Because those are the only games I'm going to consider going to in person. That said, the first couple of years at the Coliseum will be fun. I also worry, honestly, if Paul Allen doesn't re-up Pete Carroll, I think that it's going to be an attractive, like, I have that fear that it will be an attractive destination for him to end his career. Probably not as a head coach, maybe as a VP of operations, but it would still be a bummer to lose Pete Carroll at any point. I think he's been the best thing to happen to the Seahawks in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And were he to go to a division rival, and I think he could, that would be a bummer. And I would love nothing more than for Paul Allen to give Pete Carroll all of his money for that not to happen.
Let's play a quick game here, because that was actually something I was going to ask you. But let's play a game where, I'll let you do it. You give an argument for why you think he'll stay. So for people that don't know, Pete Carroll's going into the final year of his contract. This summer is probably kind of crucial to figure out what's going on with him, if he does an extension or not. Because I don't think they'd probably want him to go into his final year just kind of up in the air. I mean, I don't know what they want, but... So let's say, so give me your argument for why you think he'll stay, and then give me, and you kind of already did, but give me the argument for why you think he is going to end up leaving.
I think he might stay another 3 years, say, as a head coach.
That was the number I thought up to, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be the contract I can imagine him signing. I think it would be a lot of money per year. That is the one uncapped portion where an owner's wealth can really make an impact on a team. No owner is wealthier than Paul Allen. No coach is more impactful than Pete Carroll, except for probably Bill Belichick. And I'm not a big fan of his as a person. Mm-hmm. So I would love to see Allen lean on his wealth to have that impact on the team. I also think there's a degree to which his guys have about 3 years left. Like, the way that the roster is constructed, you can look 3 years forward and see him having his guys around him, whether it's Earl Thomas, Bobby Wagner. That defense should be able to stay intact. There's no reason to think Wilson's going to decline in the next 3 years. That seems like the window for him. And then you have the stadium opening in LA, and you have a retirement job potentially down where his foundation is. That makes sense. The argument against it is Paul Allen is a wild card. I follow the art scene in Seattle, and Allen recently installed a museum in one of his Vulcan buildings in South Lake Union, and about 6 months in, he just pulled all the funding and turned it into an event space. And you're just like, man, what if he just decides he doesn't... Yeah, it's just like, I don't like the idea of being beholden to a wild card. That said, I just read ESPN has a great piece up about the move to LA, and all the ownership backroom dealing that led to the Inglewood site that the Rams have being chosen over the Carson site that the Raiders and Chargers would have used. And Paul Allen has a very small role in that piece, but it's an active role, and it's a very rational role. And it's a moment where he asks the owners to think very rationally about what these two sites could provide the NFL. And I think it's the rational choice for him to throw a league-best contract to Pete Carroll for 3 years. And I think it's in Pete Carroll's best interest to sign that deal for 3 years. So that's my hope. Yeah. But the other side of it is he's got real LA roots. That team has good young talent at running back and defense, which is what he likes. It's a chance for him to rehabilitate his image down here in LA and to go out in a city where he's made a huge impact in the past and have his final job of his career be down here. So it'll be really interesting, and I really, really hope he gets re-signed.
Yeah, I would add, I think that was really well done in terms of the two sides. I think I don't think about Paul Allen that much when I think about it. I kind of just think, what does Pete Carroll want? Because I think they'll give him the option to stay, obviously. I kind of think about Pete Carroll. I'm like, he always talks about how he looked up in the Bills rafters, like when he was an assistant with the Jets or something like that, or when he was the head coach there, and he the whole win forever thing started when he saw all their division and NFC or AFC title banners and all that hanging up in there, and his definition of win forever is doing it at a really, really high level for a really, really long time. So the thing that's keeping me comforted in the fact that I think Pete Carroll's going to stay for another couple of years, I think he'll probably sign a 2-year extension, and so we'll have him for 3 more years in Seattle. The reason I think that's going to happen is because I feel like he hasn't gotten what he wants. He did that in with USC. He did it for 10 years or whatever. And what year is he on? 6 now with the Seahawks. I just feel like he isn't finished with what he wanted to do in Seattle. So that's kind of what's keeping me comforted. But I think it'll be, we'll kind of be on pins and needles until he actually signs something, because I agree with you. I think he is the thing that makes the Seahawks work. He's the engine that kind of makes them run. And so if he was gone, I think the whole dynamic would change. John Schneider's obviously a really good GM, so that would be great to keep him. But I don't know. You just can't replace Pete Carroll, I just don't think.
Well, let's not forget that the most important factor at all, the average male life expectancy is 76 years old. He hasn't got many years left. He'll probably die as Seahawks head coach.
Yeah, I think Pete Carroll's living to an average age. He doesn't seem like an above-average physical or energy guy at all. I think he goes down right on par.
He's got 1 foot in the grave.
Maybe a few more days left for Pete Carroll, and just a touching tribute to the late Pete Carroll right here on Reel the Field Goals. I don't know. Anytime contract situations come up for coaches, I just get blank stares, or I just give a blank stare. I'm gone. I'm just it's not anywhere on the same level as a player for whatever reason. I think it always feels like a foregone conclusion, or sometimes there are the breakups. Mike Holmgren left the Packers in the middle of Brett Favre's career for Seattle. Dick Vermeil left St. Louis right after winning a Super Bowl with Kurt Warner, just having 1 season with Kurt Warner. So you never know what's going to happen, though. You would think, that he's right here right now with a 27-year-old quarterback that is pretty much one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Spike, what did you think of Russell Wilson's season, especially the last 8 or 9 games? Did you expect him to ever become the type of quarterback that would throw 35 touchdowns or something like that in a season? Do you think that he could go on that Drew Brees trajectory?
I mean, that was the upside. I think that from about week 8 of his rookie year to the end of his rookie year, when you saw that run of 8 games and you projected forward, you're like, what he did over the last 8 games was sort of what you were hoping he could maybe be able to do. And the fact that he put it together when he did, with a few more years left in his physical prime, with a few more years left with those legs the way they are, it's really exciting. I think for me, he's right on the fringe of the top 5. He's by the end of this year, he got in there, but there were also some guys who were hurt. And also, whatever was happening in Green Bay was super weird, and I can't believe they're retaining Mike McCarthy, although I can believe it, but I can't believe it. So for me, like, Wilson is the most important thing, and I think you've written about this, Kenny, where if you've got a quarterback at that level, you've got a chance to win every year. And when you look at a guy like Breeze or Rodgers, even though they've got one ring at this point, they're still viable almost every year until 2 years ago for Breeze. And I think Rodgers was even viable this year. You know, they gave the Cardinals a real game. So I think it's really exciting. And when I think about Pete Carroll leaving, I get scared because I don't see an in-house successor, really. I'm not super thrilled about the notion of Bevel or Cable taking over and being head coach. I don't think Richard's ready. I don't think Rocky Cito. I mean, I don't know enough about Rocky Cito other than what I hear, but I don't think he's a head coaching candidate for us. But that said, when you've got a guy like Russell Wilson, that's the best bridge you can hope for. So if Pete Carroll were to leave, you know, we become the most desirable possible location for a potential head coaching replacement. It doesn't feel like a total disaster the way it would if our quarterback situation were any more fragile.
I mean, that should play some sort of factor. If Pete Carroll, if he seems like the type of guy that doesn't like to leave, some place or someone hanging that he has feelings for, like he says he likes to see his coaches get promotions. Do you think that he would ever consider leaving the Seahawks if he didn't feel that there was a good candidate to replace him? Do you think that that's something that he's sort of looking out for every time he sort of hires a coach, or I mean, I would assume that he has his guys where he's like he wants to groom one of them to be the next Pete Carroll in Seattle. Wouldn't you say that?
I would imagine so, yeah, and I don't know who it is. I don't know how he feels about Chris Richard, but that's obviously a possibility. That said, I remember how things ended at USC and best laid plans went awry. College football is a much more corrupt institution than the NFL in so many ways. Not a fan of it for a bunch of different reasons. The biggest that they don't pay players, and that's where that program got in trouble. But he did leave it in relative disarray. So as much as he speaks to wanting to leave a legacy, and as much as the NFL does create a better atmosphere to leave a legacy, both in terms of player continuity and in terms of the fact that it's not the nightmare that is NCAA football, I worry just a tiny bit, but it's just a tiny bit, and I think you're right. And I don't know why I just played devil's advocate, but I did.
Kind of along the same lines, obviously the Seahawks didn't get as far as we're used to seeing them get in terms of, this is the first Super Bowl in a really long time. Kenny and I were joking about it last week or whatever. It's like it's been since the Nixon administration, since the Seahawks were in the Super Bowl or something like that. But
yeah, that checks out.
Yeah. But I mean, in terms of the direction they were going, how do you think the second half of the season, and then obviously their playoff win over Minnesota kind of bodes for how they will play next year, just overall as a team?
I think it bodes well, and I think about the second half against Carolina as boding really well. The first half was both us getting outplayed in ways you'd expect, but also a bunch of breaks going against us all at the same time. And if you're worried that this team has lost its edge or that the Super Bowl loss was still lingering in a negative way, I don't think they put up 24 unanswered and give themselves a chance to recover an onside kick and make it back to the NFC title game. Which, again, that's not a great chance of winning, but they had a shot after being down 31 points and missing on some plays in the second half. They didn't even play perfect football. And so I think you go into next year really confident. I think a lot of the pieces are in place. I think you still have questions on the offensive line that need to be addressed, but I think there are more developing pieces in place than there were coming into this year. I like Lewinsky. I'm a follower of Zach Whitman and all that, so Kristen Stokely is very exciting in terms of potential. The line played better in the second half, so there's hope that the team's Achilles heel won't be a total Achilles heel next year. And looking at the rest of the roster, it's strong. It's really strong. I mean, that said, repping the Curse Crew, losing Jermaine Kearse could just be a total disaster that we can't ever recover from. That's just possible.
Potentially, yeah.
What do you what were some of your grades for some of the for the new Seahawks? I mean, obviously you've got uh, Thomas Rawls, Tyler Lockett, Frank Clark, the rookies coming in. Atiba Rubin, coming in on the free agent contract, he could be on his way out. What are your thoughts moving forward with, say, like a guy like Frank Clark? I mean, we didn't see a ton out of him, but at the same time, sometimes when we did see something out of him, it was pretty good.
Yeah, Frank Clark is obviously the trickiest, both in terms of his personal background and also the fact that he flashed so well at times, but then also disappeared for stretches through the year. That's it for a rookie defensive tackle / defensive end with his skill set. He wasn't a problem, and interior pass rush is a big question for the Seahawks going forward. I think we need to keep Michael Bennett in the fold, but Jordan Hill hasn't been able to stay healthy. And I think that getting pass rush from the inside, Robert Mays wrote a piece in MMQB today that talked a lot about how Denver and Carolina were both able to do that to a large degree and what that does for other teams and how hard it is to scheme against that and how good Michael Bennett is at that, having a second option who can do that. So Clark, I'm optimistic about. I think Lockett and Rawls are great. I think that this incoming class was really strong. My biggest question is, are we going to get anything out of that 2014 class? 2013 was a disaster across the board. It was, it's one of the worst NFL drafts ever. And so we didn't really fall behind the competition by having a relatively weak class. But 2014 wasn't like that, and we haven't gotten a lot of value out of that draft. And if we don't, that could be the little bit of illness that throws everything off, the dust in the engine or whatever, because the elaborate structuring that John Schneider does to make sure contracts all hit at the same time, to have a year where you're not really re-upping any of your rookies, and then to have another year right after that where you're not really re-upping any of your rookies, that's scary. So I'm not worried about. I thought our incoming cost was great. I thought Rubin was incredible at times, and I thought he and Mebane paired really well. I thought Lockett was so good and Rawls was so good, but I'm a little worried about that 2014 draft class not coming good.
I'll reread the 2014 class for people that kind of I was trying to rack my brain. Who's in that class again? So Paul Richardson was a second-round pick, obviously, and Justin Britt was also a second-round pick. Cassius Marsh, Kevin Norwood's gone. Kevin Pierre-Louis is kind of looks like a special teamer. Jimmy Staten is gone. Garrett Scott's gone. Eric Pinkins is kind of like a practice squad guy. Kiero Small is gone. So there's really no one in that class other than, I mean, I guess you could say Britt still has some potential. Paul Richardson I'm still pretty wary about in terms of, is he going to be able to stay healthy? I think I like him if he could stay healthy. I just, that I kind of wonder about that. And then Cassius Marsh is a good kind of backup guy, and he might get more time if Bruce Irvin leaves. But yeah, I mean, you're right. That whole kind of class is really underwhelming.
Yeah, Cassius Marsh was really underwhelming the first half of this year. He started to flash in the back half, and so I think he will be valuable D-line depth, but I don't think he's a star. I really do. I mean, Justin Britt is the only person who's ever blocked me on Twitter, so I clearly have said something about him that was offensive. And I believe it. I believe offensive things about Justin Britt at this point. I don't think he's a very good offensive lineman, and I don't think he's fit this scheme as well as we were hoping. And I still can't believe we were a play away from winning the Super Bowl with him at right tackle, but we were. I think that's what I said and why he blocked me. But and Paul Richardson, it's worrying, and so that to me is the bigger fear. That said, when 2012, 2011, 2010 are good, and then I think 2015 is a B+, A-, I don't think we're screwed. I don't think we're in bad shape, but I think we're going to have to, keep making like nice little trades, like for Kelsey McRae. That's a great little trade that keeps that like class alive. I think we're going to need to make another move or two like that. Mohamed Cisse, and then, oh my God, I'm blanking on the other slot corner we got. in a trade.
Marcus Burley.
Yeah, Burley, of course. Like those were nice little moves to flesh out those classes. I think we're going to need one or two more of those. I think we're going to want to get like a somewhat mature, but like maybe getting cut somewhere else, offensive lineman, just to make sure that the wheels stay greased as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the draft. Obviously, the Seahawks have another draft coming up this year, 26th overall pick, and you could speculate on all types of different players or positions and needs and everything like that. I think, once again, this focus will again be on offensive line, especially with Okung and J.R. Sweezy becoming free agents. Any expectation there in terms of Russell Okung and J.R. Sweezy? Any desires as to whether or not you would want to pay them?
There's a number that I want Okung at. I don't know if he'll sign for it. And Sweezy, there's a number there too, but I think it's looking at the left tackle market is really scary. I thought Gilliam did actually a really good job at right tackle this year. I'm scared about moving him to left tackle, and I don't know that much about the draft. I don't want to purport to be an expert, but as I understand it, you're not going to get a great left tackle at 26 this year. You're better off going for D line. That's that's all secondhand. I haven't broken anything.
I think that's what I've heard too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would rather that we be looking defensive line in the first round and looking interior offensive line in the second, which means letting Sweezy walk and finding a way to keep Okung. But that probably means not keeping Bruce Irvin, and there's a whole chain reaction. I hope that Okung representing himself means he's communicating clearly with our front office so our front office can plan accordingly. That's like my biggest hope. Because it's scary out there trying to go get a left tackle. It's just, even like a team like Carolina who managed to make it work until they played Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware at the same time, and then it stopped working altogether. Like, you want that position to be solid, and I don't think there's anybody out there better than Okung. I don't love Okung, but he's all right. And if, he doesn't play every game, though, I don't know. The offensive line. I don't know, guys.
There's no easy answer to that one.
Yeah. I hope that Chancellor's better next year, because you could get cap room by cutting him, but you don't want to do that. You get cap room by cutting Jimmy. Like, you look at all the ways in which they could contrive getting a better left tackle in, but it's ugly. It's ugly.
Yeah, you have to lose someone. But speaking of that, what do you think of the Jimmy Graham situation? Are you kind of one of those? Because I think that it feels like Seahawk fans are maybe split into two different groups, like people who like Jimmy Graham and people who want to cut him. And it seems like there's a pretty large segment of the population that just wants to cut bait right now. Where do you land in that?
I'm in both those groups. I thought Jimmy Graham's contribution this year was underrated, and then I think patellar tendon tear is really, really bad. Victor Cruz is the obvious example of someone who's coming back at 3/4 of what he was at best, and 3/4 of Jimmy Graham isn't exciting. And if there's no guarantee, but again, I don't know. I don't know what the timeline is, but Pete Carroll being optimistic about Jimmy Graham playing week 1 doesn't make me confident. He was optimistic Paul Richardson was going to have an impact this year, and that didn't happen. He's a very optimistic guy, and I'm not. I'm not against cutting him if the team knows more than I do. I'm not against keeping him if the team knows more than I do. I think Jimmy Graham on the field is great for this team. I think Jimmy Graham hobbled and never making it back is not worth $9 million.
Right. That's
I think
very rational answer.
Jimmy Graham at 3/4 is like a Jim Ram.
Wow.
Anyway, Jim Rome. I think it's a Jim Rome, maybe Chris Everett.
Yeah, I think that we can all sort of feel. I feel like it's so. The money stuff just upsets me that people. Anybody would think to quantify like such an unknown in terms of what it's worth, and what it's worth to the Seahawks. I think that they've planned this out, but it would be pretty tough to get rid of your first round pick after 1 year, the guy that you gave up that first round pick and that center
Yeah.
for
They need to stop
get.
doing
And
that.
yeah,
Sorry.
well, it's probably going to happen again. I'm sure. I'd be surprised if they're picking 26th overall this year. But
Yeah.
like even Max Unger, I mean, he's going to get cut by the Saints, so there's no reason I think to. Who knows if Max Unger could come back? I think there's definitely different ways for them to rebuild this offensive line. I don't think J.R. Sweezy should come back. As far obviously Russell Kung would be the big one, and I think Jimmy Graham. I think they can afford all these guys. I mean, there was some speculation. Do you guys buy any of the speculation today that Marshawn Lynch could have a change of heart and that the retirement's not real?
I
really.
hadn't seen that.
Just small buzz. Usually, and I think it's once again coming
Jason
from Jason
Cole.
Cole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when there are reporters who have I'll cross that bridge when I get there. I think the team has to cut bait with Lynch regardless, and I think that him retiring is obviously the most lovely way for that to happen. But I don't think that Marshawn Lynch fits on the team next year, sort of regardless of what he wants to do.
I think
Yeah.
the report is that the Seahawks are worried, or not worried, but that they are leery of his the finality of it, which is probably true because he's just a weird guy. But I don't think he'll be back regardless.
No, probably not. I mean, at that dollar amount, all that kind of stuff, it was surprising somewhat that he even retired as opposed to like letting himself get cut, right? Like,
Right.
could have.
Yeah, it cost him like $4 million or something.
Potentially $5 million they could get back from him, from what I understand. But who knows if they'll go for it? And at this point, it's kind of unclear.
Yeah. Well, we hardly knew ye, Marshawn. No, we knew you pretty well, but you will be missed. I'm very looking forward to the Thomas Rawls era. I think that he could lead the league in rushing next year. I think that he's a very exciting player. And not just, because a lot of people say, oh, these guys, they get drafted later, they're undrafted, and then the next year you can see that they were sort of exposed as not being that good. But, Thomas Rawls it wasn't like he wasn't a top recruit out of high school. He went to Michigan. He had all of the tools there from the time he was in high school. He wasn't like playing, at a small school the whole time. He just didn't fit at Michigan. He had some off-field problems. I think if Thomas Rawls had been a success at Michigan, obviously I think he would have been the first-round pick type of player. If he finally got his opportunity by playing in the right system and getting a chance to showcase his abilities, I think the people that watch the games every week could see how much talent was there on the field. Now, I realized that we weren't talking about Thomas Rawls a second ago, and this is sort of coming out of left field, but anytime I get to interject some Thomas Rawls love, I got to do it. Spike, is there a player on the team that you love more than any other, just from without, it doesn't have to be rational, it doesn't have to be football related, but just a player that you love the most?
Yeah, I love Richard Sherman the most. He's unstoppably brilliant at what he does. He's so smart, both as a player and off the field. I am always intimidated by people who went to Stanford, but I'm not intimidated by Doug Baldwin anymore. Not after he pooped out of football. So that just leaves Richard Sherman, where I'm both in awe of his intellect. I'm in awe of how he plays. He's such a smart, nice guy. He has the whole package for me, and I think he's still weirdly underrated. The fact that he wasn't first-team All-Pro this year and Patrick Peterson is about as offensive an All-Pro selection as I can imagine. He's spectacular, and he's been spectacular for years, and I just love watching him play. I just love his confidence, and even I can think of every mistake he's made, and they're so few and they're so specific that I'm not even mad about them. I'm just yeah. Occasionally you're going to get beat. He's not a wizard, but he's so good at what he does. He's so good, and it's a combination of physicality and intelligence in a way that just makes me so excited to watch.
Danny, do you think that Richard Sherman is a good player?
I do think he's a good player, yes. I was just going to say there's 3 or 4 plays that everyone references when you're talking about, oh, Sherman got burned. There's 3 or 4 plays in his career,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could
Uh,
say that Kerry Williams probably has made more mistakes in one game than Richard Sherman has made in his career.
yeah.
Without
That's not an
exaggeration.
exaggeration. I watched the
And
Bengals game. That's not an
they
exaggeration
play
at all.
in the same system, so you can't really just blame it on the system. They were in the same team, same system. Yeah, Richard Sherman had more time to get used to it, but that didn't really even affect him as a rookie coming in the fifth round. He was
It's
good
like
to
a
go
yeah.
from the beginning.
I think if you watch, like people always like throw out like, oh, he plays in a zone, but like if you watch him play in the zone, it's actually really impressive too. I mean, man coverage is really impressive from Sherman, um, especially considering how tall he is, and he just doesn't like look like that good of an athlete, but he's an amazing athlete, and he's also a really good tackler. But when you watch him play zone, he's like he's wandering through. He's kind of just like running around, like keeping his eye on the quarterback, and he always manages to keep himself like equidistant to the different like options that are downfield, and he's so natural at putting himself in a position to make plays and really putting himself in a position to just make the quarterback not throw in his direction. So he like really takes away half the field most of the time, and I think he like for that reason I think he's really underrated. So to answer your question, yes, I think he's good.
I think that one of the interesting aspects about this current Seattle Seahawks team and franchise is when we were talking about Marshawn Lynch's Hall of Fame case is and feel free to be generous, feel free to project out futures, feel free to just think what you think about a player. I mean, how many players on this Seahawks team do you think are Hall of Fame that could get to that Hall of Fame level? Because we've talked about Marshawn Lynch, and there's other guys that you can speculate on, and you have to take into account position, you have to take into account, you know, maybe where their injury status is right now in terms of the rest of their career, like a Cam Chancellor. How many more years would he need to play at the previous level in order to get there?
Mm.
Spike, if you were to look down the roster, how many Hall of Famers do you think are on the 2013, 2014, 15 Seahawks?
Honestly, I think that there are three definites in Thomas, Sherman, and Wilson. I think to me there's no doubt about any of those three. And it doesn't take a lot of projection or assumption of them playing much longer. I think that, Wilson probably does need to play a couple more years, but I think Sherman and Thomas would, to me, get in almost immediately.
The interesting thing, I just want to interject quickly, because what I read interestingly enough about safeties was you'd be surprised how hard it is to get in the Hall of Fame as a safety. It's been something like 25 years since a safety was voted into the Hall of Fame.
Was it? Well, wait. What about Rod Woodson? Was he the last?
I know that they had been talking about how, I think they were trying to talk about, because Brian Dawkins isn't in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he was perhaps the best. I mean, of his era.
Did John Lynch get in? Am I making that up? No.
He's on the next year's list.
Got it.
No way. John Lynch has been out of the game for only 4 years.
Yeah. Well, I read that he's on the next ballot, I think.
Oh, that's just surprising to me, because
John Lynch retired
no way, because John Lynch retired 10 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
That's weird that they would say that would just be a thing where
maybe he's been on a few ballots already. I don't know.
Must be something like that. He retired in 2007. I mean, he was in the league for 15 years. John Lynch made the Pro Bowl 9 times. Yeah, I mean, he obviously isn't in the Hall of Fame yet, and he would have been eligible for sure by now. We'll have to look up perhaps more, but yeah, Brian Dawkins not getting in. Rod Woodson was perhaps the last one to get in, I think.
And I think for me, Thomas is the best since then, and I think that he's got the reputation that you'll need to get in. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and he might need to play longer. I might have overstated the fact that he could theoretically retire tomorrow and get in, but I think Thomas gets in, and I think Sherman gets in, and I mean Wilson. I mean, pretty clearly, pretty much anybody who's making 2 Super Bowls that age and then leveling up from there is going to make it. I think Lynch has a decent shot, and honestly, I don't think anybody else makes it. But I think because Bennett didn't establish himself till a little late. I don't think Chancellor's going to put together the career. I think you need to have a bunch of first-team All-Pros to be able to be in the mix at safety, and Chancellor doesn't have those. I think Wagner is going to be fairly unfairly overshadowed by Kuechly, especially since Kuechly's got that Defensive Player of the Year. So I think when push comes to shove, Wagner's not going to end up quite making it unless this nucleus wins the Super Bowl next year, and then maybe Wagner gets in. But for me, it's 3 or 4 make it, and then a couple others get some consideration.
Just to clarify, this article that I had read, it was an SI last year, and they were talking about Troy Polamalu and how it will be difficult for him to get into the Hall of Fame.
Is that true?
In the last 26 years, only one safety has been elected to the Hall of Fame. And they were talking about pure safeties. Ronnie Lott and Rod Woodson played significant portions of their careers at cornerback. So the only one that they considered a true safety was Minnesota's Paul Krause, the league's all-time interceptions leader. And this is the last one. In the last 147 players inducted to the Hall of Fame, Krause was the only true safety. So that was sort of the dearth of. And just said John Lynch has been a finalist several times, but has not been close to getting elected.
Got it.
Okay. I saw his name. I just saw his name recently, so I knew I saw something around the Hall of Fame.
I mean, other ones there would be Kenny Lee, is not in the Hall of Fame. He was Defensive Player of the Year, and Seattle fans obviously would be familiar with him. Darren Woodson, all these Woodsons that played defensive back, you get confused. But
Charles Woodson will eventually probably.
Yeah, I think Charles makes it.
He's a cornerback for the most part.
Right,
Rodney Harrison is not in the Hall of Fame. Steve Atwater. So there has been more difficult though. I would look at a guy like Polamalu and Ed Reed and just assume that they're definitely going to get in.
Yeah, exactly. I think that they paved the road for Thomas to get in also. I don't think if Troy Polamalu doesn't make the Hall of Fame, that's crazy. And same with Ed Reed. Like the fact that none have made it to this point doesn't. I don't think that necessarily means they'll make it going forward. Although, like as a baseball fan, like looking at third basemen historically, they have a really tough time making it. And a guy like Adrian Beltre basically has already amassed a Hall of Fame career if you were playing any other position. But at third base, you get a little like, I don't know, he's right on the border. He's got to have another 2 good years. But, like, maybe it's just one of those things where it's a weird blind spot. But I can't imagine a world where Troy Polamalu is in the Hall of Fame. That's so weird.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely. What do you think about Edgar Martinez's inability to get into the Hall of Fame?
I hate the Baseball Hall of Fame right now. I mean, like to me, it's like it's absurd that Edgar's not in, but like at the same time, Barry Bonds isn't in the Hall of Fame, and he's the second best baseball player of all time.
Terrell Owens didn't even get close this year.
Yeah, the reputation aspect, I think it'll work in Earl Thomas's favor. The fact that he is that like pure football guy, and I think he's known for that outside of Seattle for being like the purest football mind out there. But the reputation stuff makes me crazy. And the fetishizing being clean also makes me crazy. Like if Peyton Manning doesn't make the NFL Hall of Fame because of HGH, which he used to recover from a catastrophic injury, like that's crazy. That's so crazy, and it makes me as angry as the angry people who were keeping him out, and so my anger isn't helping anything, so I'm just going to breathe through it.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think that I've never even considered that Peyton Manning would get tarnished. I mean, even if it just doesn't seem plausible. I hadn't seen any writers do anything but blow Peyton Manning before or after.
That's fair. That's fair. The NFL Hall of Fame is different.
Yeah, it just who cares at the end of the day? But it is something that's sort of. I mean, it's cool when you have a Walter Jones up there and you're looking at him and you know that he's one of the top 5 left tackles of all time, and he played his entire career with Seattle, and it's just funny because there were also. I can't even imagine if Walter Jones, if a player like that at this time, if there was a player like that during this era of the Seattle Seahawks that held out every year and sort of pushed it to the brink, do you think that we would view it differently, given the fact that now we have certain, I think, expectations, or hold the Seahawks to a higher standard? I mean, if there was a player like a Russell Wilson or an Earl Thomas that missed all of training camp for more money, or to just hold out, or just to take a vacation or whatever, but showed up every year and was an all-pro, do you think that we would give them that same amount of slack that we gave Walter Jones at a time when the Seahawks weren't expected to do that good?
I think that's the Marshawn Lynch question. I think that he's gotten, he gets that day off every week, and he was given certain freedoms that other guys weren't given. And I think Pete Carroll being so good about letting guys be the guys, I think that Walter Jones could have worked in the modern NFL on a Pete Carroll team, weirdly, but I don't think any other franchise would have put up with that. And given that it's left tackle, I don't, maybe he would have gotten flack, and that would have been unfortunate. Football's so brutal. It's so brutal on these guys, and if what they need to play at a really high level is a week off, or to skip training camp once they've already spent 10 years in a system, I can't get worked up over that. But I think people would. I think there'd be a segment of the Seahawks fan base that would. I think there's a segment of the NFL fan base that would. And that's kind of a bummer, but I'm not amongst that group. For a singular talent, I think Pete Carroll, what makes me like him so much, I think Belichick's got a stronger track record, but what makes me like Pete Carroll so much more is that he lets guys do what they have to do to be their best. And I think he would have made Walter Jones work on his teams. And can you imagine Marshawn Lynch running behind Walter Jones? Like, oh my God. Oh, it would have been awesome. It would have been so cool. Like, yeah, I was just thinking about it, I'm just like, time machines, let's make them happen.
I think it's a good note to end on Spike's orgasm there of that happening. This is Real in the Field Goals. Subscribe on iTunes. Real in the Field Goals. Do that thing. Follow on Twitter at Field Goals. Spike, is it just Spike Friedman?
Yeah.
At Spike Friedman, Friedman. Does anybody say Friedman?
People have said it. They're wrong, but they've said it.
Catching up with Spike Friedman, as I say. You can follow his work on The Stranger and that sketch show that he hasn't written yet. That's about it. Listen to 3000 NFL Mock Draft. We'll be back next week. Check out fieldgoals.com and keep rooting for the Seattle Seahawks, as I always say. That's it for this week, and we'll be back next Thursday. Hear us then.